So let's talk ancient India and China. They're very similar to Mesopotamia and Egypt because they were the other two of the four river valleys, and they used those rivers to launch their civilization. So the Indus Valley is in modern-day India along the Indus River, making this land very, very fertile, ready for farming. Two major cities formed in India's first civilization, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, and both of these cities had streets that ran in a major grid pattern, and there were public works programs like waste and water wells. And at the very center of each civilization was a citadel, like seen in the picture on the left. This fortress enclosed buildings that were important for the survival of the civilization, like the granaries where they stored their grain, meeting halls, and other government buildings. Houses were built outside of the citadel, but within the city walls. They use a trade-based economy, which is also referred to as a barter economy, where it's like, I'll trade this chicken for your pot. The Indus Valley had a writing system called Sanskrit, but we're unable to read it for the most part. Overall, the Indus Valley civilization disappeared pretty quickly, but no one really knows why. So sometime after 2000 BC, a new people, who we refer to as the Aryans, meaning nobles, ruled over a lot of India. The Aryans what we know about the Aryans come from the Vedas, which is a sacred writing completed by them that kind of talks about their history and their society. According to these writings, people started to settle in villages that were much smaller than the cities of the Indus Valley, and these groups of villages were banded together under rajas, which was a type of government to keep that area safe. Vedic society was broken into four major social classes that are still kind of around today. The Brahmins, the priests and the teachers, the Kshatriyas, the warriors and the rulers, the Vaisyas, which were the common people, farmers, traders, merchants, etc., and the Sudras, which were the servants. And then at the very, 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 very bottom, there was another group of people called the Untouchables. And these Varnas were broken up into 100 of different subsections called castes. So often when we think of the Indian caste system, what we're really thinking of is the Varnas, but then those are broken up into even smaller castes. And these castes really determined what jobs people could hold and who people could marry. So there wasn't a lot of social mobility. The Mauryan Empire also emerged post the Vedic period. So this was one of the major kingdoms in India that was founded by Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta eventually passed on his throne to his grandson, Ashoka, in order to become a Jainist monk. He initially was a pretty violent ruler, but after he converted to Buddhism, he started to encourage lots of peace and had his policies inscribed on rocks, so similar to a law system, trying to encourage that peace and religious tolerance and uniting based on that. After the Mauryan Empire, the Gupta Empire also started to rise to power under Chandragupta, and the Guptas are known particularly for the Hindu Arabic numerals, which we still use today. So the Hindus kind of created this numeral system, and then it was continued to be developed by the Arabs a little bit later on. Hinduism is the main religion practiced in India, but it's so old, it's really hard to figure out when it started. The most basic belief is that Brahmins are eternal beings that create and preserve the world, and everything in the world is simply an aspect of Brahman. Hindus also believe that the universe is in a continual pattern of birth, death, and rebirth, essentially reincarnation, which most of us are familiar with. And your next life is determined by your karma, which is what you did here on earth during that cycle. The ultimate goal eventually of Hinduism is to break that cycle and to achieve moksha, so to go on and have an afterlife. But in order to achieve moksha, you have to fulfill a dharma, which is a set of spiritual duties and obligations. Hindus can read about all their religious teachings in three texts: the Vedas, the writings that were inspired by the Vedas, and then other sacred epics. The Vedas are these sacred hymns of praise. They're the earliest texts of Hinduism, and they're supposed to be divinely inspired directly from the Brahman. Upanishads are also thought to be revealed rather than written by people. They're philosophical reflections, so there's a lot of answers about nature and the meaning of life in those texts. There's also two epic poems, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, which tells a story to reveal how people can live according to those Vedic teachings. So around 500 BC, a group of Hindus broke away and they started to form a new religion called Jainism, led by Mahavira. The Jains felt the Hindus put a lot of focus on ritual and that these rituals were unnecessary, and so they started to argue that you could achieve moksha just by giving up worldly possessions and controlling your actions. And the main thing that they focused in on was ahimsa, or nonviolence. Another religion that also developed was Buddhism, which was based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, who also was called Buddha. Buddha learns Four Noble Truths, that is talking about suffering is a part of human life, suffering comes from people's desires for pleasure, and by overcoming that desire, you can bring that suffering to an end, and you can overcome those desires by following the Eightfold Path. Right, so the Eightfold Path is listed there: right view, right attitude, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So trying to really control your thinking about things. So over in China, their first civilizations also developed around river valleys by two rivers, the Yangtze and the Huanghe, also known as the Yellow River. And this also made these areas perfect for farming because of how fertile the land was. Historians believe that the Chinese civilization began in the Huanghe, which was the Yellow River Valley, with the Shang dynasty. During this time, China was ruled by a monarchy, and that monarchy took a lot of direction from the nobles, and governors were also used to rule distant parts of the kingdom where the king and the nobles weren't able to go. The Shang religion is mainly centered on this idea of ancestor worship, that you kept giving gifts to your old ancestors, and they would manipulate life to help that happen. They also sought the advice through oracle bones, which was a practice in which the hot rod was applied to a bone, such as the one on the left, and those cracks were interpreted into the answers of how to move forward. After the Shang dynasty, the ZHOU dynasty invaded and took over. And the main thing about the ZHOU dynasty is they continued that dynastic cycle of monarchies, but they also introduced this idea of the mandate of heaven, that the gods are the ones that are supporting a ruler. And so this makes sense that if you said, well, God gave me this power, people are going to know, wow, he must not be corrupt. During this time, there's two major philosophies. They're not religions, they're philosophies that came about: Confucianism and Daoism. So Confucianism is based on Confuci, or otherwise known as Confucius, and he started teaching people to treat others humanely and expressing love, and the biggest thing here was respect. So it was a moral code more so than anything else. And he published his thoughts in the Analects, which gave an outline for these rules in order to uphold the practices of Confucianism. Daoism focused mainly on kind of having a balance between law and based on nature. The Tao is this limitless force that all of creation has, and there can be harmony between society and nature. After the ZHOU dynasty, China fell into a period of war in which small states started battling for land and power. And by the end of this, the Qin dynasty became the first to actually unify the full Chinese empire. Shi Huangdi was the first ruler of this area, and he ruled according to a policy of legalism that taught that a powerful and efficient government is key to maintaining power, order, and control. And so he used a lot of force in order to keep that order control. He's also famous for building the Great Wall of China to improve those defenses, to make sure that those invaders that were coming, the Mongols in particular, would not come in and ruin the dynasty. The Han dynasty, which was the next dynasty after the Qin, reached its height under Emperor Wu Di, who was energetic and super aggressive. He promoted a lot of economic growth. Confucianism was used for the government under this time period, and he started to introduce a civil service system in which you had to pass a test about Confucian ideas in order to even be considered for a government promotion. During this time period, the Silk Road also started to emerge, in which connected China with all of the other empires in the Middle East and the Roman Empire, and increased trade in these areas. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you in the next video.